Hello, Midnight TCG members. This is Midnight Fox. We're coming to you with this week's Competitive Edge podcast. This week we have myself. We have Genzaki recording for us, as usual, although Mr. Quiet in the background. We have Genzo, who's our expert tonight. And we have Eddie Phoenix playing along with me as the aspiring numbnuts.
You don't know what I'm doing with this deck.
Hey, you know what? I get to join you this week on it. It's not going to be a big back and forth between me and Genzo, so this week's might actually be short.
Right, we always say that an hour later.
So anyways, this week we're following along with talking about decks that are running big in Japan and that are about to start hitting our area. And this week we're covering Elemental Dragons. So before I go too deep into it, I'm going to let Genzo go for an overview of the Elemental Dragons. And then we'll talk about them individually and how they fit into decks and how to side against them and such.
Okay, well, the Elemental Dragon deck is kind of straightforward, actually. You have 4 level 7 dragons, fire, earth, a wind, and a water. And they can all be special summoned, and they all have the card text that says you can banish 2 dragon type and or corresponding attribute monsters from your hand or graveyard, except this card to special summon it from your hand or graveyard. And as you'll find out, that becomes quite a strength for the deck, because the deck just that's what the deck does. And then there's the 4 discard dragons, which are either level 3 or 4, and they are wind, water, earth, and fire as well. And they all say you can discard and one other dragon type and or fire monster, water monster, wind monster, earth monster, so on and so forth, to special summon. You know, if you're discarding Burner, which is the level 3 fire discard dragon, you would be special summoning Blaster, the level 7 fire dragon from your deck. But that's pretty much the deck and the kind of key cards and what they do. And then the end result really is rank 7 Ixies plays or level 8 Synchro plays. The deck can do a few other things, but that's generally what it wants to do.
Well, now knowing that we're only, with the first set, only getting the adult dragons, and the baby dragons will come later, my opinion, just looking at it, probably the biggest one that's going to make an impact on the meta, and the first one we're actually going to discuss, is going to be Tidal, the Elemental Dragon of Cascades. Level 7, he's dragon, 2600 attack, 2000 defense. You can banish 2 dragon type and or water monsters from your hand or graveyard, except this card. Special summon this card from your hand or graveyard. During your opponent's end phase, if this card was special summoned, return it to the hand. You can discard this card and one other monster to the graveyard. Send 1 monster from your deck to the graveyard. If this card is banished, you can add 1 water dragon type monster from your deck to your hand. You can only use 1 Tidal Elemental Dragon of Cascades effect per turn, and only once per turn. Just my quick overview before I turn it over to Genzo, and then we kind of do our Q&A with him. Just looking through the card itself, the reason I say I think it's going to make the biggest impact right now is because Mermails are pretty well running the meta. So this guy will probably splash into a Mermail deck. I mean, this guy, along with, which one's the level? So I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, the level 7 Mermail monster.
Several. Abystheus, Abyss Lead, and Abyss Megalo.
Right there. Any of those. This guy and that. And you got Big Eye or the
This Gaios.
Dragosack in a turn. But just looking at this, kind of looks like they went towards. When I look at it, returns to your hand, I'm thinking spirit monsters, but we know this isn't a spirit monster, but it's easily summoned, and as we talked about last week, I think Konami's getting a little bit better about making sure we don't have loopholes, because they said you can only use one title Elemental Dragon of Cascades effect per turn, and only once that turn. I think they're really trying to close off the loopholes for us. But tell us a little bit about where you think this dragon in particular will go, Genzo.
I think you just made a good overall point, because ever since we got the information about these dragons, you take Tempest, which is the wind dragon. It started like a surge for Dragoonity builds, actually. I've been seeing quite a few Dragoonity builds from the OCG, and then also from TCG players who are building their own forecast decks on Duel Network and Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro and the like. I've seen Redox and I want to say Psychics and Madolche. I'm pretty sure Blaster can find his way into certain decks, such as Laval, but I don't think I've seen many variants that use him. And actually, that you mentioned Mermail with Tidal, that's kind of interesting. Like, I haven't seen anybody try that, and I haven't tried it myself personally, but it kind of makes sense, right? Because
Exactly.
he's a level 7, and that's where all their big plays come from. And they can also use him to make the rank 7 Ixies. That's pretty much like their go-to right now, which is Abyss Gaios. So, I don't know, you could run 3 of this guy, and maybe 1 to 2 of Stream.
Actually gives you options there with either running Abyss Gaios or Big Eye or Dragossack even. Or are we getting... we are getting Dragossack. So, yeah, I mean, you got 3 options in level 7. And like we just mentioned, it's
rank 7.
Rank 7. What about the baby dragon to it? You probably have it pulled up right now.
Stream. Stream, that's who you're talking about. The level 4 water.
Yeah.
I think he has the best stats out of all of them. I'm looking at them all right now. And Burner has 1,000 attack, 200 defense. Lightning has 500 attack, 1,800 defense. Reactant has 1,800 attack, 1,200 defense. And while he has the best attack, Stream has 1,600 attack, which is, it's respectable. But that 2,000 defense, I haven't drawn a lot of bad hands with the deck, but in the case that you do draw a bad hand, he might not be a bad set to protect, at 2,000 defense. Well, granted, you probably won't want to do that ever, but we don't always play this game in best case scenario mode. So, but they're really not worth mentioning outside of the fact of what they do for the deck, because like you mentioned when you read Title's effect saying that you can only use one of its effects once per turn. That's where the quality of the baby dragons comes in, because it allows you to still special summon, any of the level 7 dragons up to twice per turn, depending on your hand and what you have. Like if you have Burner, you can discard Burner and another dragon to special summon Blaster from the deck, and if you have one in the grave, you can banish 2 dragon type monsters to special summon a Blaster from the graveyard. Which is kind of good, It really allows the turns that the Elemental Dragon players have really continue on. So you get to make plays, with your discard dragons first to kind of bait out whatever defense your opponent may have. Maybe they have a torrential set. They're going to wait till they have to use it, then use it, and then you still have all those level 7 dragons in the graveyard that you can possibly continue the turn with. So, that's my thoughts on the baby dragons. I mean, they do have quality to them, because they all have relevant attributes. Some of them have decent stats. And like one of the first builds I saw of the deck, they were running not just rank 7 Ixies. They were running rank 4 Ixies monsters to kind of give them an open game, like, Lavable Chain, Maestro, Gaga Cowboy, Queen Dragon, Jin. So there was options there, but now that the deck has been developed now, and we see how explosive the baby dragons make the deck, it's pretty much your extra deck is either all rank 7s with about 2 to 4 level 8s, or it's still mainly all rank 7s with about 6 synchro monsters. So that's what they deliver the deck.
So when we look at title, and I kind of mentioned, I think it's going to have the biggest impact since we are only getting the adult dragons to start out with. Other than Mermail, what other decks do you see abusing title?
Well, I want to get away from title now because we've gone over the effect, and I don't know if Mermail will run this. Like, I can't make that statement. It's a possibility because, like you said, he is a level 7, and that's their go-to rank. That's the shutdown rank that they want to go to. So it's a possibility. But up until this point, I've seen a lot of different builds running Elemental Dragons Aztec cards, and the one I think is the most relevant, or the one I've seen the most variants that it comes in contact with, is Redox, the Earth level 7 dragon. But since they will be coming out at the same time that other cards come out, which kind of complete decks, such as Lavels, I have heard talk about Blaster being teched into Lavels, so that could be one that kind of like vies for the main tech of the 4 until we get the baby dragons. But also, like I said, with Tempest and the Dragoonity builds. So, I think the other ones are probably going to affect the meta more before we get the baby dragons.
Eddie, any thoughts on title before we move on to our next one?
Off the top of my head, no. I've got general questions about the deck itself, and some card ideas that I think I would want to ask questions about. But for right now, gives us covering most, if not all, the points.
Yeah, I got a few tech.
I guess what we need to go over, Ben, is you read through the entire effect of title, which is good.
All of them except.
Yeah, exactly, because it's like a precedent. They all have that.
Blaster's your fire. So fire. What do you think? Fire Fist, possibly, in Laval.
No. I was talking about the effects. Like, there's only one effect on each of the cards that changes, and it's you can discard this card and another of the corresponding attribute. Like Blaster, in my opinion, with that the one lone individual effect has the best effect, because you can discard him and another fire monster to destroy a card on the field. And I think that's the best one. And then Redox is, you can discard him and one other earth monster to target one monster in your graveyard to special summon it. So that's pretty good. Tempest is, you can discard it and one other wind monster to add one dragon type monster from your deck to your hand. And then Title is probably the least effective out of the individual effects, which is you can discard it and one other water monster to the graveyard to send one monster from your deck to the graveyard. So, like, since you read the entire effect of Title, I think it's only like it's important to mention that all the dragons have a lot of those effects except for that one individual effect that changes for all of them.
Pretty much.
Like there's no point in reading the effects for all of them.
The attacks change. Like Blaster looks to be the beast.
Yeah,
2,800 attack, 1,800 defense. Tempest, he's more along the lines of Monarch, 2,400 attack, 2,200 defense. Redox being the smallest at 1,600 attack, but a good 3,000 solid defense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, kind of covering them on from Title, and we kind of mentioned Blaster, and talked about target one card on the field, destroy that target. Tempest, he's the
Wind
one. You can add one wind dragon type monster from your deck to your hand. What do you think about that with we were talking about Harpies last week, and Harpy's Pet Dragon is a wind, Harpy's Channeler. What do you think about the splashability of this into the coming Harpies?
Good point. Because it's something that I come up with another member of ours, being Joshua BM, because we were just trying to think of that. We're only getting the level 7 dragons first. Then we'll have to wait a period of time before we get the discard dragons, which is when elemental dragons will become the best deck, hands down. Like, I feel safe. Like, I usually don't make statements like that, which are kind of like for certain, but I just don't see any deck out of any other cards in the game that we either have in the TCG or know we're getting from the OCG that competes with this deck. Over, especially when you look at over 10 rounds, and just because of the amount of games I've played and seen, like the hands it draws, like I just don't see anything competing with it. So until then, you're just looking at these monsters and going, what could I add them to? And then we all know from our discussion on Harpies that while they will generally make a lot of rank 4s, the real key play is the rank 7, with Chandler and Harpy's Pet Dragon. So Tempest could add, how do you say?
Little flavor, little outside flavor, tech.
Yeah, extra speed to get to there, where it doesn't put so much reliance on Chandler.
Yeah.
Because you will have those turns where you go, oh gosh, I just drew Harpy's Pet Dragon, and now I have no rank 7 Ixies play that's natural to the deck. Well, if you draw the Pet Dragon and you're running Tempest, you still have a natural way in the deck to make your rank 7 play.
Yeah, that's where I see the playability of Tempest is possibly with Harpies hitting along, and that could even possibly, it's not going to be as well speeded or as speedy as playing it with a Pet Dragon, because Channeler can search that out, but it does give you an option, because Channeler, as long as there's a dragon type, of still having your 2 level 7s to overlay for Big Eye, Dragosack, etc.
Oh, that's what's important to mention. Because Tempest is a dragon, that's why it's worth mentioning for the Harpy deck. Because Harpy Chandler won't become a level 7 unless there's a dragon on the field.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So but I see
actually for Tempest,
there.
I think,
I see a little playability there with that.
Yeah, but I think where everybody's going with it now is probably where it's going to shine the most as a tech card. In regards to Tempest, which is Dragoonity. I've seen a lot of Dragoonity builds here recently that are running the deck, or running this card in their deck.
Well, and I think with Dragoonity, you have a lot more options as far as synchros and stuff, like Gay Bulge and things like that. So, this could really shine within that deck itself. And that takes us to Redox, the little small attack monster with a big defensive wall, which, if you notice over the span of Yu-Gi-Oh, that's a lot of the story of Earth monsters. They usually have pretty low attacks, but they have beastly defenses. And where do you see this being used as far as earthy decks?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, it's been tech. The most common things I've seen it in at this point have been Psychic and Madolche. But the one I didn't mention was I've actually seen some Machina variants with it, because he's a level 7, so is Machina Fortress.
Yeah, Fortress.
And, it just kind of helps them make those rank 7 plays. So those are like the 3 most obvious, and probably, without thinking too hard, probably the most popular and maybe only, choices. But
do you see this as being teched into Malefic Skill Drain?
I don't think so, because the Earth play that they have in there is Barbaros, right? And he's a level 8.
No,
Then everything
they
else is
also
dark.
run. They also run the Gear Frame, and they also run Malefics. The Cyber End Dragon, I think, and Stardust are the most prolific two.
And Malefic Drain?
And Malefic Drain.
No, they're not going to run the gear frame. Because, I mean,
Not
their
Gear Frame.
biggest...
Fortress.
Oh, well, yeah, if they're running Fortress, maybe? I don't know, though. I still don't know, because I think that deck does what it does, and I'm not sure Redox helps that. Because, again, like, they're going to want to run... They're going to want to put Malefic Cyber End Dragon on the field. That's going to be their ultimate goal. They're going to want to bait you out with easy, cost-effective plays that get through your utility and your defense so they can drop their big win condition. So I don't know if Redox would help that deck, actually. Even with Fortress.
So, Eddie, any thoughts on the 4 we've went over before we move on to the next section?
Nope.
Well, I guess the next section, and just my thoughts, and I'm going to bounce them back and forth. As far as tech options with the cards, how do you see, say, Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon interacting with these guys?
It's quite funny, because you think a deck full of dragons has to have Red MD. My experience, and I can use my conversations with other players who are testing the deck as well, is like Red MD is like almost irrelevant. I mean, it's in all of our builds. It's in all the different, incarnations of the builds, as we've started initially with the deck and now have got to the point to where we are today. Like, he's still in the deck, but it's like, you run Eclipse Wyvern because it's great to discard with the baby dragon. And so, like, but I never search Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon with Wyvern unless I already have an in-hand Light and Darkness Dragon.
That was the other one I was going to mention. You covered him.
Red Eyes Darkness is almost like win more to the deck, which is crazy because it's such a powerful monster, and that just shows you how dynamic and explosive and powerful that the Elemental Dragon deck is. When you can look at Red Eyes Darkness and go, if I draw it, I draw it. If not, I won't care.
Well, as we kind of went over with Eclipse Wyvern, we kind of touched on that, but what do you think of using, since it is a wind, and getting the most use out of Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon? What about running Red Eyes Wyvern as a tech option, since it's a wind, it's a 4-star, and you could possibly toss in Red Eyes Black Dragons, but using it as a tech option to keep bringing back Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon. But it is a win, so it could play well with Tempest.
Well, yeah. You could add the Red Eyes Wyvern to your hand, but the problem with that is, it's like once you've spent time with the deck and understand that it wants, it wants speed and efficiency, then you realize Wyvern offers the deck virtually nothing, because again, Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon is just kind of one of those cards where you're just like, it doesn't matter. They do not need it to win. They do not need it for their explosive game states. So why waste deck spots on a card that's gonna only be strengthening a card that you don't really care if you see anyway.
Well, mine was just getting a couple thoughts on some possible tech cards I was thinking about, poking your brain about them. Eddie, what do you think? What's some tech cards rolling around in your head you want to bounce off Genzo and get his thoughts?
I definitely want to throw out Burial from a Different Dimension.
Just my thoughts on it?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Again, because when you look at the deck at face value, you're like, what does it do? And it banishes its creatures quite often. And I'll go ahead and, if you guys don't mind, lump Burial with Return from the Different Dimension, because again they both aim to access what it's used as cost before, and so when I was looking at the deck initially, I was like, well, I'm going to be banishing some dragons quite often, and so I immediately threw in Burial because I know I was going to be running a low spell and trap lined up, so I was like, I'll just throw it in because its utility, it could help continue turns, and that's what I was concerned about. Like when I was first wanting to play the deck, I didn't know how the turns would end. I didn't know if like my opponent has an answer, do I just lose? Does the turn end and I have no more plays? So I threw it in, and I also threw in Return from the Different Dimension. And through extensive testing, the first stages of as my deck changed, Burial found itself in the side deck. And not because it was going to be a side deck, well, it's just because in Dueling Network, when you're testing an idea, you put all the ideas that you want to test in the side deck. So if you're playing with a friend, you can play a game and then go, let me change this up and see how this works. And now it's dropped from the deck or completely now, because you would never use it as a side deck card, in my opinion, for 98% of decks in the game. And so if it's not in the main deck, then it just offers your deck nothing. And so I dropped it. And to talk about Return, it's the same thing. Like I put it in the main deck, and then even after I cut Burial and a few other kind of gimmicky cards to try to focus in on consistency, I left Return in because I had a few games where my opponent, while they weren't able to put themselves in the winning position, they were able to grind. And I was like, well, if I get in that situation, Return from the Different Dimension makes them pay for not being able to end the game. Sure, they were able to grind and make me go through resources by using their own resources, kind of simplifying the game state. Return from the Different Dimension just turns the table over, and it's just like, okay, sorry, it's time to end this now. But because of a trap we'll talk about a little later, again, it's another card that is almost like Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon. You see how good it can be, but it just doesn't matter. And I don't know how to say that any other way.
And now I already noticed that you were already talking about playing the Different Dimension Reincarnation. That's already in the thread that you made on the site.
Yeah.
Okay, but here's another card that I was thinking about. How many cards do you normally, like, how many dragon cards do you normally get to sit in the graveyard?
What do you mean?
Like, how many of those dragon cards are able to, instead of being removed from play, like, if they can't be removed from play, how many of them go to the graveyard?
Oh, well, if they can't be removed from play, then I suppose all of them would be in the graveyard. But if you're asking how long do they sit in the graveyard, could that be the question?
Roughly around that time.
Okay, well,
because the card I was thinking about throwing in as a tech card would be Dragon's Mirror. So that way you could start playing for the five-headed dragon.
That's what I was getting ready to say. What are your thoughts on that?
Dragon's Mirror is quite interesting, actually, because you will, at times, have buku dragons just sitting in the graveyard. And it's generally because either your opponent has a card that defends you very well, or they had a card like, say, a Threatening Roar, or a Maxi or something, and you can't get the game for some reason. The dragons will sit there, but I've noticed, like, I can Dragon's Mirror, banishing 5 of my dragons for 1 monster. Or I could use those dragons in graveyard and potentially put 3 rank 7s on the field. So I think personally, it's not required, but it is a preference card. So to me, it would just be like, what player is playing the deck, and what's their goals? What do they want to do? And so, like, Dragon's Mirror, sure, it could get out a 5-head dragon, but you're going to be wasting extra deck space for that. So, you again, it comes to player preference and how they feel, how they place values on their extra deck targets and what they want the deck to do, I guess.
So would you say maybe as an option, 1 5-headed dragon, 1 Dragon's Mirror? Maybe it's a tech option into the deck.
Hey, I won't tell you no. I'll tell you that I wouldn't run it because I like the rank 7 explosiveness from the deck. But, you know, if I'm sitting here and I'm telling you that I'm willing to continue to allow Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon to stay in my main deck, although I never care if I see it, I can't tell you no not to waste one deck spot on Dragon's Mirror. Because it's almost the same thing. It's win more, you know? It just becomes which card you want to win more with, I guess. You know?
Well, I'm thinking too, as this deck explodes, five-headed can't be destroyed by earth, water, wind, fire, or light. So in a mirror match, it could make the difference.
Fox, it can be destroyed by light. It can be destroyed by anything else.
Oh, you know something else that's interesting? Dragon's Mirror. Don't you banish the dragons from the graveyard?
Yes.
So, hey, you know, like if you say, okay, I have this information from a guy who's been testing the deck and who has other people testing the deck with him, and he says that Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, although it's a tremendously powerful creature, says it's almost irrelevant to the game. So I'm going to drop it to put in my Dragon's Mirror. And you play the game, and you Dragon's Mirror for a 5-head. Any of those
And we lost you.
I'm here.
Oh, you cut out on that part of it.
Oh, I was basically just saying, you know, like, Dragon's Mirror would activate the banish effects of the level 7 dragons. So, again, like, you know, if it's one card and you want to try it out in your deck, it's not going to be detrimental. I mean, again, I think it kind of, like, hinders the explosiveness and the utility of all the rank 7s you can produce. But if you activate it and you banish some level 7 dragons, you're going to add a card for all those banished dragons. So, I mean, there's value there.
And any other questions? I'm actually going to look up something real quick, Eddie. Any other questions while I look this up? Because I just want to double check this.
For me, it would be, since I know that most of these monsters are elemental based, would there be any way to throw in something like would like Rescue Rabbit still be able to be played because of being able to use those normal dragon monsters like Hunter Dragon and things like that?
Are you saying like in combination with elemental dragons, like a rabbit dragon deck or something?
Sorta.
I guess they could. Again, I have no experience with that whatsoever. Because again, I've noticed that the deck is nasty with the rank 7s, and so I've just been going that route. Like again, there are players, especially in the OCG and in the TCG, who are running almost a balanced extra deck between Synchro Monsters and Ixies. They main deck 3 Veilers. I don't main deck Veiler. They main deck Flamvell Guard, which is a good tech that you could talk about for a support monster. Some of them main deck Delta Flyer, some of them main deck Debris Dragon. So they can go into monsters like Stardust Radiance Dragon, Starform Dragon, Trident Dragon. And so like there's always going to be, you know, something there, you know. It's just my personal belief is the deck that wants to Ixies a lot for that rank 7 is the best version of the deck. And so that's where I'm staying. That's where I keep my mind focused on trying to develop that in the techs. You know, like Exploder Dragon, for example, is a great support monster because the Elemental Dragon deck fears Ophion from the Evil Swarms. Well, if you run Exploder Dragon, it can be tutored to your hand from Redox's effect when he's banished, and it's a main deck bit of removal to try and get Ophion out the way, so you can make your plays. So I'm sure if somebody spent the time, they may be able to find some kind of little trickery there.
Yeah, I was wrong. That's what I was looking up on 5-head. Light is the only type that can destroy 5-headed. So, I mean, in a mirror match, it shuts down earth, water, fire, and wind. Light is the only type that can destroy 5-headed by battle. So that's why I'm possibly as a tech option, maybe 5-headed with 1 dragon here. But I don't know if I'd waste any more space than that because, yeah, like you said, you really want to go into your level 7s. So if Eddie don't have any more tech options to think of to bring up and get your opinions on, let's hear your thoughts on what you think are the best tech options into elemental dragons.
Sure. I think there's a few, and I'm gonna rip off a few names just to get a good list out the way because I'd like to end this discussion on one card in particular that I think is what's making this deck just ridiculous. And Eddie got to see that today when he helped me record a combo tutorial for the deck. But before that, we'll talk about, I think we already mentioned Wyvern. Some people have been running the card at 3. Some people ran it at 1. I think 2 is nice because you're going to run 3 targets for it with Red MD and 2 Light and Darkness Dragons. So 2's enough, and it's a great because you're discarding, and it's almost like Mermail. When they discard Dragoons, they get to add a card, So it kind of gives you that aspect. But as far as the tech cards, we mentioned Fog King and Fusilier Dragon, the Dual Beast. They're both level 7, and they both allow you to normal summon them, which is neat. Because again, the deck stresses that level 7 or that rank 7 play. I think Fog King is probably the better of the 2, just because it has that water attribute, and if he's in the graveyard, you can use him for such. But those are some options, and the deck does a very, very good job of preserving the normal summon, so you get to use it when you want it, and that's really key for the deck. And then the last card I'd like to talk about, since I've kind of dropped a lot of the cards that you could run as support for the deck, would be Koikimaru Drago. He's a wind, which means Tempest, when it's banished, can add it to your hand because it's a wind dragon. And you can look at it this way, you get a Tempest effect to resolve, add Drago to your hand, and then use your turn, special summoning, creating the board you want, putting the rank 7 monsters you want on the field, and then normal summon Koikimaru. So even if your opponent max sees you, they're going to be digging for that Tragodia or that Gorz to save their life. Well, once you've done special summon, then you just normal summon for your turn Drago, and now their failsafe is going to fail them, because they won't be able to prevent, they won't be able to drop that Gorz or Trag to prevent their life points from going to 0. So those would be some key ones. What do you guys think about those?
Well, we know that Gold Sarko is one of the key targets to the deck, and it's probably a little early because they actually haven't hit here. But do you see when Elemental Dragons hit, Gold Sarko taking a hit as far as how many copies or possibly being banned when Elemental Dragons hit? Because
I don't think
loves them.
I don't think Gold Sarko would be banned. I'm not even sure if it would be limited, but it's a good talking point right now because Gold Sarko is generally, a 1-for-1 that you have to wait 2 turns for, whereas it becomes a +1 because you Gold Sarko, you banish one of your level 7 dragons, and then its banish effect activates, and you immediately add a corresponding correct card to your hand. So 3 of is kind of a standard for the standard elemental dragon deck. You run 3 of it, and it's like a better version of Rhoda, Reinforcement Army. So I think it's good. I don't know if it'll be banned. I can't make that call.
Well, I don't know about banned, but I think if it comes out as bad as as mean as it's looking in the OCG, maybe limited or semi-limited.
By the way, if anybody's looking for Gold Sarcophagus, I've got plenty of them that you can have.
I think the most interesting card is a card that's coming out, where it can work for other decks that run level 7 monsters, but it seems almost like it's built for this deck. You know, you banish. The name of the card is 7 Star Sword. It's a spell card. You banish one level 7 monster from your hand or your side of the field. You draw 2 cards. You can only activate one 7-star sword per turn. I mean, what's that about? You activate it, and you say you have the spell card. You activate it. You banish a dragon. That's -2 to you, but you draw 2 cards. So now it's even play. But when you banish that level 7 dragon, its banish effect activates, and you turn that card into a +1 that digs 3 cards out of your deck.
Well, we already know what. Everyone's pretty familiar with Big Eye, and we know that this goes into the deck. But I think a card over the last one we didn't really go into, and I think I was really wanting to save it for Elemental Dragons. Talking a little bit more. Why don't you talk a little bit more about Dragossack and its synergy with this deck?
Well, we're not done with the support cards yet, are we?
Well, it's a support card in the deck. I mean, it's one of
What's
your
the extra deck card?
rank 7 Xyz, one of the ones you're going to go to.
Well, before we go through that,
kinda
then
lump it
let's
into
just go ahead and finish the support cards off with Light and Darkness Dragon, because it's kind of important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's actually going to start the conversation with Dragossack, Ben, because Dragossack gives you the easy, cost-free Light and Darkness Dragon. But yeah, so like you have your Wyverns in your deck. Its effect is easily activated because of all the baby dragons, or as I like to call them, discard dragons, which means the ability to get Light and Darkness in your hand, even if you don't draw it, is pretty easy. So why is it so good? Well, because it's that 4 negation, that 4 effect negation that just kind of like shuts down a turn. So like you go special summon 2 of your level 7 dragons from your discard dragons. Then you overlay into Dragossack. You detach for its effect to produce 2 tokens. And again, because the Elemental Dragon deck can preserve that normal summon for when it wants to use it versus having to use it, you use those 2 tokens, and then you put Light and Darkness Dragon on the field. Now your opponent's staring down Lad, which is going to negate 4 of their effects, unless they open a decent enough hand to where they can force some negations, so they can summon a monster to attack over it. But a 2800 attack Lad with a 2600 attack Dragossack is a monstrous field, and it can do that turn 1.
Exactly.
And what's funny is, like, even if they spend resources to get Lad weak enough to attack over, he's still gonna, when they destroy him, he's still gonna bring back, something like a Blaster with 2800 attack, or a Redox with 3000 defense.
Exactly.
Which is gonna return to your hand because it was special summon. It's kind of goofy, man.
So, covering Lad as the last tech option.
Oh, actually, it's not, Ben. Super Rejuvenation. We can't forget that. I just scrolled down and saw it.
Yeah, that's your draw engine for the deck.
Yeah, so, like, again, it's another card that allows a deck to be like Mermail, where they just discard cards, and normally that's a bad thing, but for decks like these, it's kind of a good thing, because if you have, say you have 2 discard dragons in your hand. For instance, you have Lightning and String, and you have 2 other dragons to discard. That means you're going to discard 4 dragons that turn to special summon 2 level 7 dragons from your deck. Then you can overlay into Dragossack, detach, produce 2 tokens if you don't have a Lad. And that's still a pretty nasty field, because now Dragossack can't be destroyed while you have those tokens. And then you activate Super Rejuvenation, and you're going to replenish your hand. All 4 of those dragons you discarded are going to be replenished in the end phase when you draw 4 cards. That's... I don't know. That's really good for the deck as well.
The funny thing is to think of how long Super Rejuvenation has pretty well been a dead card.
Yeah.
As far as
outside of like the weird Exodia deck.
So, then staring down the extra deck, we know Big Eye, we know Dragossack. What's your thoughts on other staples that need to be in here? I mean, probably Stardust Dragon for Starlight Road.
To be honest, for my standard Elemental Dragon deck, that's where no other gimmick is attached. I only run 2 synchros, if I'm not mistaken. I run Crimson Blader and Red Dragon Arcfiend, and I run Red Dragon Arcfiend because the deck has quite easy access to making eradicating epidemic virus live. And you know that one card shuts spellbooks out of the game. If you resolve epidemic virus, you pretty much win against them.
Okay, so let me. Go ahead. I'll let you finish.
No, you're fine.
Okay, so my question would be if you run Needle Sealing, could it run well for you, or normally for this new dragon type deck, how many monsters are usually out per turn?
Good question. That's what one of the talking points I mentioned earlier was that the deck can kind of, because of the baby dragons and what it allows the deck to do, it can kind of just commit just enough to where if you don't respond to this, then this is enough for me to put pressure on you, and I'm okay with that. So the generic kind of standard Elemental Dragon deck, you know, Needle Sealing, you know, unless you've already invested cards on the field as well, it might generally be, you know, like a dead card in the matchup. But there is, because we're talking about the extra deck section now, a variant, which you got to see in the combo tutorial, which is a Karakuri variant, which will produce lots of monsters at one time, which could make Needle Sealing better in that matchup.
Any other areas to cover on extra deck?
Sure. The Karakuri version. So basically what this does is you basically want to be able to, you want to open your hand when you draw your 6th turn and you're getting ready to start your turn. You want to see the ability to special summon 2 of your level 7 dragons, and you want to see, oh gosh, what's his name? The level 2 Karakuri tuner.
Is it Sazant?
No, Karakuri Barrel MDL 96 Shinkuro. That guy. So basically, that's what you want. You want to look at that opening hand and say, okay, I can summon 2 of my level 7 dragons, and I have him. If you have him, the play sequence is basically this: you overlay your 2 level 7 dragons, and then you want to Ixie summon number 42 Starship Galaxy Tomahawk. After that, you want to normal summon your Karakuri Barrel, and then you want to detach the 2 materials from Tomahawk to activate its effect. And what his effect is, you can detach 2 Ixie materials from this card, special summon as many Battle Eagle tokens, Machine Type Wind, level 6, attack 2000, defense 0, as possible. They are destroyed at the end of this turn. Also, your opponent takes no battle damage for the rest of this turn. Alright, so now your board looks like number 42, 3 level 6 tokens, and that level 2 Karakuri Barrel tuner. So now you're going to take 1 token in that Karakuri Barrel, and you're going to synchro summon Burrito. That's the level 8 Karakuri synchro with 2800 attack. Alright, you're going to summon him, then you're going to resolve his effect to special summon 1 Karakuri monster from your deck. And you're going to special summon your 2nd Karakuri Barrel. You're going to take that barrel and your 2nd token and synchro summon your 2nd Burrito. Resolve his effect, special summon your 3rd Karakuri Barrel level 2 tuner, and you're going to take him and that last token and make your 3rd and last Burrito, and then you're going to use his effect to special summon your Karakuri Strategist. That's the 500 attack, 1600 defense, level 3 tuner. You special summon him in attack, and then activate and resolve his effect to switch 1 monster's battle position. You're going to switch his own and put him in defense, and then you're going to draw 3 cards for all 3 of the Burritos. Then you're going to overlay all 3 of those level 8 Burritos to Ixie summon Enthusiastic Coaching King Giant Trainer. His effect is you can detach 1 Ixie's material from this card to draw 1 card and reveal it. And if it is a monster, inflict 800 damage to your opponent. During the turn this card is activated, you cannot enter your battle phase. The effect of Enthusiastic Coaching Giant Trainer can only be activated up to 3 times per turn, which I don't know why they would even put that stipulation on him, because he only has 3 materials. But, that's 6 cards you have just drawn after going through that many cards in your deck and that many plays and 1 sequence of plays. So that also will change the extra deck. But I think it's also important to mention, after we got that bit of ridiculous out of the way, is Crimson Blader. You could run Stardust Dragon, you can run Scrap Dragon. I would say you have to run Crimson Blader if you're not running any other synchro. You have to run him, because he's going to be kind of important, especially, whenever you're defending your opponent, whether it's the mirror match or not. If you can get his effect to resolve and they can't produce a field to combat your own, it's game over, yeah.
So Fox. Okay,
I'm
so
here.
I was gonna say so.
So, really that kind of takes out the extra deck. So, the next thing we want to move on to when we talk about Elemental Dragons is tech options against it. I have a few that I want to bounce off. I'm sure Eddie has a few. And we'll kind of bounce these back and forth and then get your thoughts on what what you think the best options are. The first one is really generic and stupid and probably not going to be used, but I just throw it out there because, as you said, it's probably going to be the stupidest deck once we get the baby dragons too. And it's a card that's very old. Dragon Capture Jar. What's your thoughts on that?
I have to look that up. 1 sec. What?
Oh wow, that's one that'll just catch you off guard, and it's just like, wow.
It's a good side deck option, but it's only going to be if you're running against the Elemental Dragons.
Alright, so I'm going to read this effect, and you tell me if this is the card you're talking about. Change all face-up dragon-type monsters on the field to defense position. Also, they cannot change their battle positions. Is that the card?
That's the card, but I'm not thinking. Outside of Redox, the other guys.
Yeah, so that's gonna do you no good. Because if you're activating that card, you're imagining your opponent's gonna end when they special summon those guys. Like, that's all they're gonna do.
That was my funny one to just toss out there and get you to look.
It's an old card, and you definitely made me look.
Being serious, though, first of all, probably the best option against it, Imperial Iron Wall. We're taking away the ability to remove cards from play.
Doesn't the guy you were talking about earlier do the same? The Chaos Hunter? They cannot remove cards?
I kind of put them all. My 4 tech options that, seriously, I thought of against this deck are Necro Valley, Chaos Hunter, Imperial Iron Wall, and Soul Drain. Soul Drain would probably be the lowest, but Necro Valley, Chaos Hunter, and Imperial Iron Wall all take away the ability to remove things. Necro Valley more if it's based out of the graveyard, but Imperial Iron Wall and Chaos Hunter both take out complete removal. The good thing about Chaos Hunter, and the reason he's kind of going up in price with Elemental Dragons, close to hitting is that his effect only affects your opponent's side of the field and they're removed from game. Whereas Imperial Iron Wall, if you're playing Chaos Dragons, it affects the entire remove from game, as does Necro Valley. But Chaos Hunter only affects your opponent's side, and he's a level 7.
Okay, yeah, so I was asking because I was pretty sure that was the guy you were talking about, being Chaos Hunter, that is. Because I wanted to group Chaos Hunter and Imperial Iron Wall together. You know, because they both aim to stop the Dragon deck from banishing. Because, well, that's where they gain real advantage. Sure, the discarding with the baby dragons is nice, but where they kind of recoup what they've lost through summoning is when they banish. You know, they banish those big dragons. They get to add a correct card, you know, to their hand. Here's the thing, though. Like, say I have Imperial Iron Wall face up, and I'm facing Elemental Dragons, right? Well, they now know that Imperial Iron Wall is going to shut down their ability to special summon from the banishing side of the game. So now they can just play a waiting game until they get Blaster and another Fire attribute monster and discard to destroy it, because it's an answer that they are always aware of. Chaos Hunter has a little bit more of a surprise factor, but it's still like a trap. The opponent doesn't see it, then it's activated, and now they know it. And his weakness is 2500 attack. They can just basically, you know, use the baby dragon to discard summon. You know, they can't attack, but they can still discard summon with the baby dragons. 2 guys overlay into a rank 7, and maybe big guy detach a material and take your guy from you. So it's like when you're thinking about this deck and how are you going to play against it, it's almost like what can do the best.
The main thing I think of Chaos Hunter, and the only reason I bring this up, is I look at it as a mirror match option if you're going to play it. But even with a Gaga Magician, he's a level 7, which means you can make your own Big Eye. He's a special summon by a discard. So, I mean, your opponent's going to be special summoning anyways. Why not use it? And you shut down their removal, but you still have yours intact. I mean, if you don't even want to keep this guy out, he's an overlay unit with your own adult dragons.
Yeah.
If you can have your build set up right.
It's being used at the moment, you know. So is Imperial Iron Wall. Like, I mean, I obviously have cards that I lean toward, but I still feel the same way about them when I'm thinking just to myself, when I'm in theory mode and I'm building the deck, as I do when I'm talking to you guys or someone else about the deck. You know, I'm just like, there's a lot of mediocre answers to compete. You know, like if you're playing in the mirror match, you want to have Maxis in the side deck, so when your opponent goes off, you draw into a bunch of cards and can potentially get around his defense to your next turn. So there's Maxi. You know, it's against a par because its quality can only be determined on what you draw, and so since you never know what you're going to draw from a Maxi activation, you can't give it a 100% bill of quality. Again, Chaos Hunter, a lot of people are using it, and I still don't think it's the right choice. But I can't give you at this moment the right choice, in my opinion. Like I said, people are playing Chaos Hunter, people are playing Imperial Iron Wall. Some people are running a combination in the OCG of Mental Drain or Mind Drain, whichever it's going to wind up being called, and Soul Drain. You know, to kind of stop the discard dragons in the hand and to stop the banishing from the graveyard. I don't know. I think it's a basic. I think it's going to come to if you can prevent yourself from losing to it in a turn, but while still having a deck that can win the next turn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there are some cards, you know, that you can mention, like this can give you the ability, because again, you're right, Chaos Hunter stops them from banishing, so it forces them to have the discard dragons. And that's where I think its quality comes from, because when you're in theory mode, you can kind of get lost in that best case scenario mode. You can go, well, Chaos Hunter's not that good, he has a low attack, they can just discard dragon into a rank 7 Ixies play, but what if they don't open 2 discard dragons? What if they only have 1? You know, where the deck would normally go, okay, I only have 1 discard dragon, but I can still banish to get that other level 7 dragon on the field to make my rank 7 Ixies play. Chaos Hunter prevents that. So, I mean, again, there is quality there, and which means there is a reason people are using it as a side deck option. I'm just saying the deck can draw some pretty powerful hands, and I'm not sure, you know, which of the two I prefer over the other. You know, because I think personally Imperial Iron Wall and Chaos Hunter are the better choices against the deck.
What are your thoughts?
My question is for asking, hey, can we run things like summon limit and I just had that other card. Summon limit.
Summon limit's a good enough one. I mean, I like where you're going with there, because excuse me, what's the, you know, if you look at Imperial Iron Wall and think about its weaknesses as a card, the same weaknesses it has, Summon Limit has. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Summon Limit might actually be better. I don't know. I can't give you that answer at the moment. But I just had my other card too. Huh? Oh,
I just had my other card for that build as well. It's the counter trap card that allows you to discard 1 card to stop an opponent's monster's effect. And I can't remember the name of the other card, and I just had it.
Divine Wrath?
Divine Wrath, thank you! I just had it, and it left me, and then came back.
Yeah,
thank
well,
Does Divine
I'll give you this. I'll give you this. Summon Limit is a great mention. I don't think Divine Wrath would be, and I'll tell you why. I'll give you the what would you say, the quality appraisal of both of your choices. Summon Limit addresses the problem as an entirety. Neither player can summon more than 2 times per turn. So that means it doesn't matter if your opponent opens up a truly busted hand. Say he has 2 discard dragons, and after he does that, he'll have the engraved dragons to banish. If he doesn't have an answer for Summon Limit, his turn's over once he summons 2 dragons. So his basic play will be to summon 1 dragon, whether it be Redox and defense to defend himself, or something like Blaster with a large attack to defend himself. He might just end his turn waiting on an answer to Summon Limit. Sure, if he has the Blaster in hand with another fire, he has the answer. But again, Summon Limit is one of those cards like Chaos Hunter where it puts the onus on your opponent. It says, hey, you have the answer or you lose. And if they don't, they lose because you control the game. I think Summon Limit, actually, I'm kind of jealous that I didn't think of this. Way to go, Eddie. That's quite nice. I really do think it is. Because, again, you know, they can special summon 2 dragons, but if they can't make that rank 7 Ixies play, oh well, right?
Bingo.
Unless they've done it the harder way, you know, like the baby dragon is the easy summon, in my opinion. I don't know. You know, we'll say this, unless they can banish to summon 2 level 7 dragons, you know, they basically can't do anything. But even after the fact, even if they can banish to summon 2 dragons, they can attack you, put pressure. If you have defense against it, then it becomes an even weaker position for them, because we have to remember that all level 7 dragons have the effect that, say, if this card was special summoned, not special summoned by a certain way, but special summoned anyway, you know, from Red MD's effect, from their own effect, from Monster Reborn. If they were special summoned, they return to your hand in your opponent's end phase. So, Summon Limit can really present I'm going to have to look at that card. That's really good. Now, the quality appraisal, I think, is high on Summon Limit. On Divine Wrath, it doesn't address the problem on a large enough scale to be a relevant choice. it targets one card and says your effect will do 0. But if they have other effects in hand or engrave, they just keep going. You know? So what I was mentioning earlier.
So something like the idea for like a Tyrant's Throw, like as well as for the deck would be like going against it, would be something like maybe like a Tyrant's Throws or something along those lines that'll shut down those effect monsters, to where you can't normal or special summon effect monsters. It essentially shuts down the deck.
Interesting. Tyrant's Throw. I wouldn't give it as high of a quality grade as Summon Limit, but I would definitely grade it higher than Divine Wrath. It's interesting. If you have the deck that can efficiently put 2 normal summon monsters on the field, and more importantly, put 2 monsters on the field that aren't there because of Rabbit. You know, because just say like your opening hand, you have Rescue Rabbit, you have Tyrant's Throws. Tyrant's Throws is doing you no good. Because if you Rescue Rabbit, those monsters have to be used that turn, or they're not. You know, and if you give your opponent who's playing Elemental Dragons one turn could be all they need. So, in my opinion, if you're going to run a Tyrant's Throws route, you need to make sure that you can, you know, maybe like double summons or something. I don't know. You know, it's not something I've thought about, so I don't know what a really consistent way of making sure you have 2 normal monsters on the field. But you would want to work that out. You would want to make sure you can, at a high enough consistency level as well, put 2 normal monsters on board.
Just throwing out other units, throwing out other ideas. I could.
No, I mean, hey, if you can get that, that's even better than any of the side deck techs, because that gives them no option. They don't even get to summon 1 monster. You know.
I think we've covered everything. Fox?
I think we have. So, I mean, as we can see through this podcast, Elemental Dragons are going to be pretty dynamic. They're going to be hard to combat because they do have so many draw engines. The deck is just stupid. It's just that broken. Probably the most broken deck we've gotten since Teledad. Would you say, Genzo?
I do, and I think I've made their comment, and it seems like I was talking to Eddie, but it may be because me and Eddie had a conversation on a previous podcast about rating decks, you know, with the tier label. But I know I have told people that this could be the deck, the first deck since Teledad to be considered tier 0, because I don't think Plants were. I know some people were trying to hype it to be, but I just don't think it was. This deck could be that. It could be. Especially when you think Teledad, just everything about it was so much bigger and more dynamic than anything before it. You know, like, even the price value of the deck as a whole. Like, how expensive are Big Eyes right now? And you have to run $3. You know, I mean, you can get away with running 2, but you don't think for a second Dragosac's going to come out cheap. I mean, I just don't see that happening. So, I mean, it could be.
I don't know. Anything else?
Just a final statement from me. Just a final statement from me. Like, we did a lot of rambling, and I think it's just maybe I didn't have a good idea when we started, because I know I started terribly, and I apologize to you guys for that. But there's a lot you can talk about this deck. You know, like Ben started the conversation early. You know, like, you can use these level 7 dragons in decks, you know, that have nothing to do with the Elemental Dragon deck itself. You know, while you're waiting for the Baby Dragons release. But the deck is still young, but it's getting the attention it deserves. And it's getting the attention in the theory side of the game, where people are just going to keep finding great cards to add into it. They're going to keep finding great cards to play against it. So, you know, let this not be the answer. This is not the end all, this discussion. You know, we may find ourselves in a few months coming back to this very deck to talk on it again. You know, I don't want you know, there are things we probably forgot in this one. just know that we covered a lot of the cards, even if we did just name drop them and breeze by them. You know, just listen to the name of the cards and see how they apply. And like I said, we may have to come back to this at some point.
Well, I guess that kind of covers where we need to go. Just keep referring your friends. We still have the race to 8,000 going on. Of course, we are in need of some new mods. So if you're pretty active and you're interested, take a look at the application section. Make sure you're tuning in on Tuesdays. Tuesdays we have our WCS series, and we need someone to take the title from Keo, who's carried it for 3 weeks. Thursdays we have our flash tournaments. The Grand Prix is getting ready to wrap up, so probably by the end of the week we'll be drawing for the raffle draw. And the finalists in that ended up being Beaver Commander and Amy Lee. And stroll down, go take a look down at the Mafia section. We still need a few more players to get our game going. And I think that would be about it. So we'll let Eddie dance us off tonight.
Happy April Fools, everybody!